Section 5, Volume 2 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. Volume 2, Section 5. When it was the 38th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when the Caliph said to Nur al-Din Ali, I will write thee a letter to carry to the Sultan Mohammed bin Sulayman az-Zayni, which when he readeth he will not hurt nor harm thee in aught, Nur al-Din asked, What? Is there in the world a fisherman who writeth to kings? Such a thing can never be. And the Caliph answered, Thou sayest sooth, but I will tell thee the reason. Know that I and he learnt in the same school under one schoolmaster, and that I was his monitor. Since that time fortune befriended him and he is become a Sultan, while Allah hath abased me and made me a fisherman. Yet I never send to him to ask aught but he doeth my desire; nay, though I should ask of him 1,000 favours every day he would comply. When Nur al-Din heard this he said, Good! write that I may see. So the Caliph took inkcase and reed pen and wrote as follows: In the name of Allah, the Compassionating, the Compassionate. But after, This letter is written by Harun al-Rashid, son of Al-Mahdi, to His Highness Mohammed bin Sulayman az-Zayni, whom I have encompassed about with my favour and made my viceroy in certain of my dominions. The bearer of these presents is Nur al-Din Ali, son of Fazl bin Khakan the Wazir. As soon as they come to thy hand, divest thyself forthright of the kingly dignity and invest him therewith. So oppose not my commandment, and peace be with thee. He gave the letter to Nur al-Din, who took it and kissed it, then put it in his turband and set out at once on his journey. So far concerning him. But as regards the Caliph, Shaykh Ibrahim stared to him, and he still in fisher garb, and said, O vilest of fishermen, thou hast brought us a couple of fish worth a score of half dirhams, and hast gotten 3 dinars for them, and thinkest thou to take the damsel to boot? When the Caliph heard this he cried out at him and signed to Masrur, who discovered himself and rushed in upon him. Now Ja'afar had sent one of the gardener lads to the doorkeeper of the palace to fetch a suit of royal raiment for the Prince of the Faithful. So the man went and, returning with the suit, kissed the ground before the Caliph and gave it him. Then he threw off the clothes he had on and donned kingly apparel. Shaykh Ibrahim was still sitting upon his chair, and the Caliph tarried to behold what would come next. But seeing the fisherman become the Caliph, Shaykh Ibrahim was utterly confounded, and he could do nothing but bite his finger ends and say, Would I knew whether am I asleep or am I awake? At last the Caliph looked at him and cried, O Shaykh Ibrahim, what state is this in which I see thee? Thereupon he recovered from his drunkenness and, throwing himself upon the ground, repeated these verses: Pardon the sinful ways I did pursue; ruth from his lord to every slave is due; confession pays the fine that sin demands; where then is that which grace and mercy sue? The Caliph forgave him and bade carry the damsel to the city palace, where he set apart for her an apartment and appointed slaves to serve her, saying to her, Know that we have sent thy lord to be Sultan in Bassorah, and, Almighty Allah willing, we will dispatch him the dress of investiture and thee with it. Meanwhile Nur al-Din Ali ceased not travelling till he reached Bassorah, where he repaired to the Sultan's palace, and he shouted a long shout. The Sultan heard him and sent for him, and when he came into his presence he kissed the ground between his hands and, producing the letter, presented it to him. Seeing the superscription in the writing of the Commander of the Faithful, the Sultan rose to his feet and kissed it 3 times, and after reading it said, I hear and I obey Allah Almighty and the Commander of the Faithful." Then he summoned the four Kazis and the Emirs and was about to divest himself of the rule royal, when behold, in came Al Mu'ín bin Sáwí. The Sultan gave him the Caliph's letter and he read it, then tore it to pieces and putting it into his mouth, chewed it and spat it out. "Woe to thee!" quoth the Sultan, and indeed he was sore angered. "What induced thee to do this deed?" "Now by thy life, O our lord the Sultan," replied Mu'ín, "this man hath never foregathered with the Caliph nor with his Wazir, but he is a gallows bird, a limb of Satan, a knave who, having come upon a written paper in the Caliph's hand, some idle scroll, hath made it serve his own end. The Caliph would surely not send him to take the Sultanate from thee without the imperial autograph and the diploma of investiture, and he certainly would have dispatched with him a Chamberlain or a Minister. But he hath come alone, and he never came from the Caliph, no, never, never, never." "What is to be done?" asked the Sultan, and the Minister answered, "Leave him to me and I will take him and keep him away from thee, and send him in charge of a Chamberlain to Baghdad city. Then, if what he says be sooth, they will bring us back autograph and investiture; and if not, I will take my due out of this debtor." When the Sultan heard the Minister's words he said, "Hence with thee and him too." Al Mu'ín took trust of him from the King and carrying him to his own house, cried out to his pages, who laid him flat and beat him till he fainted. Then he let put upon his feet heavy shackles and carried him to the jail, where he called the jailor, one Kutayt, who came and kissed the ground before him. Quoth the Wazir, "O Kutayt, I wish thee to take this fellow and throw him into one of the underground cells in the prison and torture him night and day." "To hear is to obey," replied the jailor, and taking Nur al Din into the prison, locked the door upon him. Then he gave orders to sweep a bench behind the door and, spreading on it a sitting rug and a leather cloth, seated Nur al Din thereon and loosed his shackles and entreated him kindly. The Wazir sent every day enjoining the jailor to beat him, but he abstained from this, and so continued to do for 40 days. On the 41st day there came a present from the Caliph, which when the Sultan saw, it pleased him and he consulted his Ministers on the matter, when one of them said, "Perchance this present was for the new Sultan." Cried Al Mu'ín, "We should have done well had we put him to death at his first coming." And the Sultan cried, "By Allah, thou hast reminded me of him. Go down to the prison and fetch him, and I will strike off his head." "To hear is to obey," replied Al Mu'ín. Then he stood up and said, "I will make proclamation in the city. Whoso would solace himself with seeing the beheading of Nur al Din bin al Fazl bin Khákán, let him repair to the palace. So follower and followed, great and small, will flock to the spectacle, and I shall heal my heart and harm my foe." "Do as thou wilt," said the Sultan. The Wazir went off and he was glad and gay, and ordered the Chief of Police to make the aforementioned proclamation. When the people heard the crier they all sorrowed and wept, even the little ones at school and the traders in their shops, and some strove to get places for seeing the sight, whilst others went to the prison with the object of escorting him thence. Presently the Wazir came with the 10 Mamelukes to the jail, and Kutayt the jailor asked him, "Whom seekest thou, O our lord the Wazir?" Whereto he answered, "Bring me out that gallows bird." But the jailor said, "He is in the sorriest of plights for the much beating I have given him." Then he went into the prison and found Nur al Din repeating these verses: "Who shall support me in calamities when fail all cures and greater cares arise? Exile hath worn my heart, my vitals torn, the world to foes hath turned my firm allies. O folk, will not one friend amidst you all wail o'er my woes and cry to hear my cries? Death and its agonies seem light to me, since life has lost all joys and jollities. O Lord of Mustapha, that Science see,